Hey, welcome back to the Stories Creeper. Let's begin the story. The lighthouse keeper's secret. The sea was still that night, quiet, as if holding its breath. And from the old cliffs of Grey Rock Point, the ancient lighthouse blinked its tired light into the endless dark, slow and methodical. It had stood there for more than 100 years, defying the wind and waves. But few knew that beneath its foundation, something waited. My name is Edward Harrow, and I was the last person to spend a night inside that lighthouse. That's what they told me when I arrived. No one stays overnight anymore. They laughed as they said it, not cruelly, more like they were warning me, kindly, as if I was about to hear something breathing just outside the door at midnight. But I didn't believe in such things. I was practical, a surveyor, hired to document the structure and recommend restorations. The Elderby Historical Society wanted to turn the place into a museum, a quiet seaside attraction for tourists passing through the village. Quaint, peaceful, safe. At least, that's what it seemed. That I arrived late in the afternoon, my backpack weighed down with papers, tools, and a notebook I'd been carrying since university. The path up to Grey Rock Point was steep, winding, and lined with weather-beaten stones. No birds, no wind, just the sound of my boots on gravel and the distant lull of the sea. The lighthouse loomed tall and lonely at the edge of the cliffs. It hadn't been lit in years, yet as I reached the final steps, I thought I saw a faint glimmer from the tower window, a flicker like someone passing a candle too close to a curtain. But when I reached the base, there was nothing. The windows were clouded with salt and dust. The heavy metal door moaned as I pushed it open. The air inside was cool and damp. The scent of rust, old oil, and something else, something faintly metallic, almost sweet, like blood left too long on cold stone. Still, I shook off the unease. I'm not a superstitious man. The ground floor was small, a circular room with peeling paint and a narrow spiral staircase coiling up the center. There was a desk, once white, now speckled with mold. A cracked lantern sat beside a leather-bound logbook. That's where I found the first clue. The logbook had entries dating back to 1897, carefully written in old cursive. Names, temperatures, wind directions, ships passing in the night. But near the end of the book, the handwriting changed, became erratic, slanted, letters scratched with force. Light goes out at 3:12 again. No wind, no clouds, just goes out. The sea was whispering last night. I heard my name. She was on the rocks again, in white, weeping. When I came close, she vanished. I flipped through the last pages. They were mostly blank, except for a smear of something dark and a single line scrawled in the center. It wasn't the sea that took her. I closed the book. Still, I didn't leave. Not yet. Maybe it was just a lonely man's descent into madness. I told myself that as I climbed the stairs. Each step creaked beneath my boots. The air grew colder as I ascended. Dust danced in the slivers of light leaking through the narrow windows. The walls bore names carved deep into the stone, initials, dates. And in one place, the word run, gouged over and over again in frantic, uneven scratches. The top was the lantern room. The great glass dome where the light had once spun, guiding ships through fog and storm. The machinery was long dead, rusted in place. But as I stepped inside, I saw something impossible. A candle, still burning. No breeze, no flame flicker, just burning, steady. I stared for a long moment, unsure whether to touch it. Instead, I took out my notebook and made a quick sketch of the room. That's when I heard it. Footsteps. Below me. Coming up the stairs. Slow. Deliberate, I called out. Hello. No answer. The steps continued. I moved to the stairwell and looked down. Nothing. But the steps continued. I backed into the room and pulled the door shut, holding my breath. The candle still burned, steady and warm. Then silence. I stood there for what felt like hours. Eventually, I laughed at myself. Get it together, I whispered. Just the old place creaking. Settling. I opened the door. No one on the stairs. Of course not. I descended again, back to the ground floor, where I set up my sleeping bag beside the desk. The logbook sat closed, but it looked newer, as if someone had polished the leather. I told myself it was my imagination. I tried to sleep. But just as I drifted into a dream, I heard something. Knocking, not at the door. Beneath the floor, knock. 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 Point 3 times. Then silence. I sat up, heart thudding in my chest. There was no basement. No hatch. Just stone beneath me. I pressed my ear to the floor. Knock. Louder this time. And then a whisper, very faint. My name. Edward. I stood. Grabbed my flashlight. Searched the room. Nothing. But the knocking didn't stop. It followed me, slow and steady. Finally, I found a seam in the floor. A barely visible crack where two slabs didn't quite meet. I pried at it with a rusted crowbar from the old supply shelf. The stone lifted with a groan. Below, stairs, not on any blueprint. They descended into blackness, wet and cold. I should have left then. I know that now. But I had to know. I took the flashlight and stepped down, one slow foot at a time. The air turned thick, almost soupy. And the smell, coppery, like old blood. The bottom was a chamber. Circular, carved from rock. In the center, a pool of water, still as glass. Surrounding it were carvings, symbols I didn't recognize. And on the far wall, a mural. A woman in white, standing on the rocks, eyes hollow, mouth open in a silent scream. Her hand stretched toward the pool. My flashlight flickered, and then I saw her reflection. In the water, but she wasn't on the wall. She was behind me. I turned. Nothing, just the dark. I ran. Up the stairs, through the lighthouse, out into the night. The sea roared. The wind screamed, but the light was on. The lighthouse blinked again, casting its beam across the sea, even though the power was gone, even though no one was inside. The next morning, the villagers found me at the base of the cliff, staring into the waves. I told them everything. They didn't act surprised. One of the older men simply nodded and said, "You saw her then." "Who?" I asked. He looked at the lighthouse, then back at me. "The keeper's wife. She drowned in that cove below. He tried to bring her back. Opened something down there he shouldn't have. Ever since, the light comes back on when someone sees her." I asked why they didn't destroy the place. "Seal it." His answer chilled me. "We tried. Stone won't break. Fire won't catch. She won't let go." I left that same day, but sometimes, late at night, I dream of Grey Rock Point. I see her, standing by the sea, still waiting, and sometimes, when the wind is just right, I swear I hear knocking. I'll start a new story about the clockmaker's paradox. Time doesn't move the way we think it does, that we like to believe it's linear, that it flows forward like a river, always in one direction. But what if time was not a river, but a loop? Or worse, a tangle, where memories become premonitions, and the future has already happened. My name is Silas Emery. I'm a historian. Or at least, I was, until I found the clock. but I'm getting ahead of myself. Or behind. Honestly, I can't tell anymore. It started in the fall of 1978 in a town you wouldn't find on any map. Alderhill, a place where time moved just a little too slow. The air always smelled like copper, and the clocks in the church tower never chimed at the right hour. A quiet place, forgotten, almost I'd been sent there to catalog the belongings of a recently deceased recluse, one Alphonse Marin. Locals called him the clockmaker. His home stood at the end of a gravel path, overgrown and crooked. Ivy climbed the brick walls, curling around the windows like fingers trying to pry them open. The air around the house felt heavier somehow, like every breath weighed just a bit more than it should have. I arrived at noon, or so I thought. My watch read 12 o'clock exactly. But when I stepped through the front door, every clock inside the house struck 3:17. Every single one. Ticking. I in perfect synchrony. Even the broken ones. I paused in the doorway, the hairs on my neck rising. I took a deep breath, pulled out my notebook, and stepped in. The house was filled with clocks, tall ones, small ones, brass and wood, ticking and talking, humming with a sound that was more alive than mechanical. But the strange thing was, none of them were powered and no batteries. No winders. Nothing. Just motion. Perfect, eerie motion. I moved through the parlor, brushing past heavy curtains and dust-coated armchairs, until I found the study. That's where I found it. The clock. It was unlike any I'd ever seen. A bronze device, nearly 5 feet tall, with four circular faces stacked vertically, each marked not with numbers, but symbols, strange sigils, and constellations. The gears inside moved slowly, deliberately, as if considering each second before it passed, and at its base, a plaque, tarnished but readable. The time stiller, property of A. Marin, to be wound only with intent. I had no idea what it meant, but I couldn't help myself. I touched it. The moment my fingers brushed the bronze, every clock in the house stopped, all at once, and a voice, deep, soft, almost mechanical, whispered, "Wound with intent, bound by consequence." I recoiled, but the device pulsed beneath my fingertips, a warm glow rising from its core. And just like that, the room around me changed. The books were newer, the paint on the walls fresh. I looked out the window. The ivy was gone. Children played in the street. And across from the study, a door that had been shut tight was now wide open. I stepped through. It was a workshop, brightly lit, tools perfectly arranged, and in the center, him, Alphonse Marin, younger, smiling. He looked up at me as though he had been expecting this moment. "Ah," he said. "So you found it." I could barely speak. "I, you're, you died." He nodded. "Several times. It gets easier." "What is this place?" He chuckled. "Not what, when. This is a stitch in time, Mr. Emery. A fold. A moment pressed between others. And you've walked straight into it." I stared at him. "Are you saying this is the past?" "No," he said, standing. "I'm saying this is all time. At once." He led me to the time stiller, its gears now whirring at full speed. "You wound it with intent," he said. "That means you were looking for something." "I was just here to catalog your things." "No," he replied. "You were looking for meaning. Answers. Maybe even a way back." "Back. To a moment you regret," he said. "That's what we all want." He placed a hand on the clock. "But time doesn't fix regrets. It magnifies them." I wanted to leave. I turned for the door, and suddenly, I was back in the parlor, but everything had aged, crumbled. The wallpaper peeled like dead skin. The windows cracked. And the clocks were silent that I stumbled outside. The town was gone. Just fog. Endless fog. And then, the time stiller began to tick again, louder now. More urgent. From somewhere, I heard my own voice. Younger, panicked. No. Stop it. I didn't mean to. And then silence. When I looked back at the house, it wasn't there. Only the clock remained, standing alone on the grass, its four faces now showing familiar images. My mother dim white childhood dogged at a clock tower on fire. And finally me, older, eyes wide, mouth open in a scream. I don't know how much time has passed or whether I ever left Alder Hill. Sometimes I see people flickering in the fog, ghosts, or maybe just echoes. Some call my name, some wear my face. The time stiller still ticks, and I still hear Alphonse's voice whispering through the gears. You wound it with intent. Now live with the result. The end. Great. Let's begin the next mystery audiobook. The Man in Apartment 6B. Some buildings remember. They remember the footsteps, the voices, the arguments that echoed through the halls. They remember secrets. Some buildings even remember you, even if you've never lived there. This is the story of the man who lived in apartment 6B. And the night I realized he never existed. My name is Theo Mallard. I'm a quiet man by nature, always have been. I work in city archives, filing property deeds and historical maps. It's not glamorous, but it pays the rent and keeps my mind calm. That I moved into Farewell Heights on a Tuesday. 6 floors. No elevator. Brick facade. A building with bones. Rent was cheap, too cheap for the city, and that should have been my first warning. But I was tired. Tired of roommates, traffic, noise. I wanted silence. Solitude. Apartment 6A was perfect. Top floor, view of the alley, dusty old fireplace, and the soft hum of pipes in the walls that sang you to sleep. The only other apartment on that floor was 6B. And from the moment I moved in, I heard him. He walked slowly, always at the same time, 2:17 a.m. I'd hear the creak of the hallway floorboards, a pause, then the soft click of a key in the door across the hall. Once inside, silence, no music, no television, no voices, just him, existing. A presence that filled the space next to mine like smoke behind glass. A few nights later, I passed him on the stairs. A man in a long gray coat, carrying a leather case. He didn't speak, just nodded once, eyes fixed on me like he was studying something beneath my skin. I nodded back. Good evening. He said nothing, and somehow his silence echoed. I grew curious. Knocked on his door once the next day. No answer. I asked the landlord, a cranky man named Marvin who lived on the first floor. Who's the guy in 6B? I said. Marvin paused. His eyes narrowed. Nobody lives in 6B. I blinked. No, I saw him. Just last night. Older guy, gray coat. Marvin waved me off. Hasn't been rented in years. The floorboards are warped. You probably heard someone on the stairs. But he was already walking away. Back in my apartment, I stood at my front door and stared at 6B. The number on the door was faded, the knob rusted. There were cobwebs in the corners. No footprints in the dust. But every night at 2:17, like clockwork, I heard the footsteps. Click, creak, turn, shut. I stopped sleeping. One night, I sat by the door with a thermos of coffee and my notebook. The second hand on my watch ticked toward the minute. 2:17 a.m. The floor creaked. My breath caught. I watched through the peephole and saw him, exactly as before. Gray coat, Leather case. Blank face. He turned his key and stepped into 6B. I opened my door instantly. The hallway was empty. I crossed the space between us in seconds and knocked hard. No answer. I tried the knob. Locked. I reached down and, strangely, the keyhole was filled with wax. Sealed. My hands trembled as I stepped back. The next day, I requested records from the building archives. Farewell Heights had a long history. Built in 1902, once a boarding house, then apartments. I searched for 6B. That's when things stopped making sense. There was no 6B listed. The floor plans labeled 2 units, 6A and a storage closet, but the closet had its own lease. Once, signed in 1973 by a man named Dr. Ira Renville. Occupation, time psychologist. The term meant nothing to me. But I read on. The lease ended abruptly. Presumed deceased. No record of a body. Just a note from the former landlord. Strange man. Said he was here to study echoes. Left behind only a leather case and several pages of diagrams. My heart raced. I returned to 6B that night, pressed my ear against the door, silence. Then, a voice. Theo, I froze. You're early, it said. It's not your time yet. I backed away. That night, I dreamed of hallways folding in on themselves, staircases that looped, and clocks that ticked backward. The next evening, the door to 6B was open. Inside, it was exactly like my apartment. The same fireplace, same cracked tiles, but the furniture was older, dustless, still warmed out on the table, a letter addressed to me. Dear Theo, you have begun to notice the fracture. That's good. You are closer than most. The building is not haunted. It is alive. And some walls remember better than others. Point 6B is not an apartment. It is a reflection of choices, of futures that almost were. You are not alone. That we are watching too. At the bottom, a drawing, a spiral with eyes at each bend, and beneath it, one final line. At 2:17, don't open the door. I stayed up that night. At 2:17, I heard the steps again. But this time, they paused at my door. The handle turned. Once, twice, then silence. The next morning, 6B was gone. Not just closed. Gone. Behind my hallway wall was solid brick. As if it had never existed. I moved out 2 days later. Now I live on the other side of the city. I've checked my lease 100 times. There's no 6B here, but sometimes at 2:17 a.m. I still hear footsteps. The next in our audiobook is After Earth. The silence below. We left Earth 200 years ago. At least, that's what the records say. Floods, fires, famine, the usual end-of-the-world cocktail. A final exodus into orbit, and then silence. But silence is never just silence. Some of us still listen. Some of us still wonder. And some of us go back. My name is Elias Rain. I'm a cartographer, a mapper of dead places. They send me to abandoned colonies, fractured moons, and hollowed-out stations, always chasing shadows left behind. This time, they sent me home. Earth. Technically, Earth is off limits, declared unstable, toxic, uninhabitable. But deep below its surface, one last signal had begun to blink. A faint pulse, buried beneath the ruins of what used to be Northern Europe. It was old, ancient by modern standards, but constant. A single tone, repeating every 77 seconds. They gave me 6 days. One shuttle, one directive. Retrieve what you can, leave nothing behind. The moment I stepped out of the ship, I knew something was wrong. The sky above was thick with gray ash, but there were birds. Real birds. Small black things circling the ruined towers of a city that shouldn't have been standing. The air was cold but breathable. No winds. No radiation spikes. Just stillness that I made my way through what remained of Old Lion, or what I assumed it once was. A forest had taken root in the skeletons of skyscrapers. Ivy curled around metal beams like veins in a dying animal. I checked the tracker. The signal was still pulsing. Steady. From somewhere deep below the center of the city, I found the entrance to broken plaza, half swallowed by dirt and trees. At its center, a staircase descending into black, carved stone, old symbols, not French, not Latin. Older. I activated my light and descended. The stairs went deeper than I expected, deeper than was reasonable. The temperature dropped. My breath came out in clouds. And somewhere below, the sound of humming, low, continuous, like a machine breathing in its sleep. The stairs ended in a vast underground chamber, a city beneath the city. Towers of crystal and metal, all humming softly, and at the center, a spire. Black, smooth, pulsing with the signal. I approached slowly. As I reached the base, my comms device crackled. A voice, faint, distorted, whispered, "Elias." I froze. No one knew I was here. My mission was unregistered, confidential. The voice came again. "You've come back." I shined my light up the spire and saw my reflection, but older, eyes sunken, beard gray, face hollowed up. He stared at me. "We waited," he said. I took a step back. My mind raced. Was this some hallucination? A memory echo? I turned to leave, but the path behind me was gone. The staircase, sealed. Only silence remained. And then, the humming grew louder. All around me, lights flickered to life. Screens embedded in the walls. They showed Earth, but not how it had been. How it was now lush, alive, green, forests thicker than ever before. Rivers glowing with bioluminescent algae. Animals I'd never seen. Buildings overtaken, yes, but not destroyed. Not erased, reclaimed, and a voice, deeper now, not a man's, filled the chamber. They left. You remained. You remembered us. I didn't understand. What are you? I asked aloud. Memory, it answered, buried in the bones, waiting to grow again. A tree grew in front of me. From stone, leaves of light unfurled from its branches. The others feared us, it said. But you are curious. I stepped forward. Why me? Because you still listen. Hours passed, or maybe minutes. Time didn't behave normally there. I sat beneath the tree, and the spire glowed with every breath I took. The reflection of myself had changed, now younger, at peace, and I saw others now. Shadows moving through the city. Not ghosts, not people. Possibilities that I understood then. This place wasn't man-made. It had been here before us, watching, waiting. Earth had not died. It had changed, and now it remembered who I was. When I returned to the shuttle, I carried only one item, a single leaf, still glowing. I tried to explain what I'd seen. The underground city, the tree, the voice, but they didn't believe me. They said the signal stopped the moment I arrived. The photos I took? All gone. The recordings? Static. Only the leaf remained, still warm, still alive. Sometimes, when I close my eyes, I hear the humming again, and I see Earth, not broken, not dying, listening, and waiting for us to come home. Now beginning the audiobook about the visitor from Orion, I used to believe we were alone. Not because I was closed-minded or skeptical, but because, honestly, the silence of the stars seemed to speak louder than any proof ever could. Thousands of years, countless transmissions, endless watching, and nothing. Until the night something knocked on my window. And I live in a house with no upstairs. Let me start at the beginning. My name is Jonah Pell. I'm a retired radio astronomer. I spent 30 years listening to static from deep space, hoping, maybe, one day, I'd hear a signal that wasn't born of stars or noise. That never happened, at least not officially. But some signals don't come through the airwaves. Some come differently. It was late October, and I had recently moved into a small cabin on the edge of Lake Eldon. A quiet place, far from cities, where the nights were black and wide and the air smelled like pine and mist. I'd grown used to the silence. Enjoyed it, even, until one night, at exactly 2:46 a.m., I woke up to a tapping sound. Point three knocks. That I sat up. The house was still, then again tap, 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 but it wasn't the front door. It was the upstairs window, which was impossible because the cabin was one story. I grabbed my flashlight and stepped out onto the porch. The fog was heavy, clinging to the trees like breath on glass. The roof was empty, but in the dirt just beneath the window, I found something strange, not footprints, but patterns. Circles, interlocking, perfectly pressed into the soil, as if someone had stamped them with a machine. I didn't sleep the rest of the night. The next evening, just after dusk, I heard the humming, soft, almost musical, not coming from any direction, just around me. It lasted 3 minutes, then silenced the MY radio. An old receiver I kept from my observatory days picked up nothing. No spike, no anomaly. But the hum, it stayed in my bones. That night, I dreamed of light. Not just any light, but a shape made of it. Standing in my doorway, watching. No eyes, no mouth, just presence. And when I awoke, there was a word in my mind. Clear, as if someone had whispered it into my skull. Orion. I began researching. The Orion system had long been the subject of speculation, rumors of signals, lost probes, strange gravitational anomalies. But nothing ever proven. Still, something tugged at me. Each night, the knocking returned. Sometimes on the roof, sometimes at the back door. Always soft, never violent. Then came the night of the eclipse. I sat by the lake, radio on my lap, flashlight off, just watching the moon slip behind Earth's shadow. The world turned quiet, darker than usual. And in that silence, I saw a shimmer in the trees. It wasn't a creature. Not like anything I'd seen. It didn't walk. It drifted, its form barely visible, like heat over pavement. The air around it bent, and as it moved closer, the humming returned. Louder now, vibrating through the rocks, the water, my teeth. I should have run. But I didn't, because deep down, I knew it wasn't here to hurt me. It stopped 10 feet away. No closer, and then it spoke, not aloud, but into my mind. You listened. When others stopped, we came back, because you remembered. I asked or thought, what are you? Its response chilled me. What you will be. I blinked, and it was gone. No footprints. No trace. Just the lake, still and quiet. But something had changed. The circles in the dirt became patterns in the sky. I began to see shapes in the constellations. Messages, almost. I knew them. I don't know how. And then the sky whispered, just once, Orion is not a place. It's a memory. Weeks passed that I tried to return to normal life. I wrote in my journals, sent anonymous reports to old colleagues. No one took them seriously, but the knocking continued. Only now, it was inside the house. One night, I awoke to find the radio glowing. Though it was unplugged, the dials turned on their own. Slowly, deliberately, and a voice, faint, layered with echoes, came through. We left something behind. In you. That's when I remembered the dreams. They weren't dreams. They were downloads, ideas, blueprints, maps to something I didn't yet understand. Somewhere in my DNA, they had planted knowledge, a seed of their own kind, not to invade, but to guide. We were not alone, that we never had been, that we just stopped listening. And those of us who still do, we become part of them, not abducted, awakened. Now, I wait. Each night, the knocking grows louder, but I'm not afraid anymore, because I know when the time comes, I won't be taken. I'll be remembered.